Hi everyone, welcome back to another of our Demystifying Post-Production webinars. I'm Ellie and I'm one of the trainers at Maxon, and I've got Matt and Simon alongside me. Hi guys.
Hey everyone.
So just quickly, can everyone see our screen? Can you hear us? Do we sound okay? How's everyone doing?
I'm testing out a new mic. You have to tell me to see if that's any good.
It's a lovely mic.
It's a lovely mic, isn't it?
Yeah. We just need to move it over a bit, straight smack bang in the middle of the screen.
That's better. Yeah, that's right. Yes. So people say it's okay, so that's good. Thank you. Thanks, Randy.
Perfect. Thanks everyone. So as always, this webinar is being recorded. So this link for this recording. And if you want to access some of the previous recordings, you can do so via the page. We'll actually link that in the chat for you. It's a Red Giant blog, which is on the screen now. And yeah, there you can see kind of all the stuff that's been going on in May and all the stuff that me and Matt have been doing in June. And then next week, is actually kind of kicking off a new set of webinars based on color correction and grading. And that'll be using the Magic Bullet suite, and that'll be with one of our trainers called Max. So if you're interested in stuff like that, be sure to kind of sign up.
Max is an absolute star. He's a whiz in Resolve, and he's transferred a lot of techniques into the Magic Bullet tools as well. So even though you can use Magic Bullet in Resolve, so it's going to be interesting. I'll be joining him on those ones, so that'll be a lot of fun.
And so this is actually kind of our fifth and final week in the kind of Cinema 4D like mini series within this demystifying series. And throughout this, we've looked at loads of stuff. So kind of modeling in primitive objects, things like textures and lighting and rendering. And what we thought with this final week, we thought we would kind of look at the stuff that you guys have been asking for. And it's been a few like reoccurring things. For example, there's C4D to Red Giant integration. A lot of you have been asking things like that. So shortly we'll be passing over to Matt, who's going to take a look at how you can kind of prep your files and your models and your materials in Cinema 4D, take them over to After Effects, and then have a look at kind of some of the Red Giant tools, and in particular Mia, and see what we can do with that. And then hopefully later on we have time. I've actually created a scene for a more photorealistic render. And I'm going to break that down with you guys. We're going to look at some lighting and how we set up materials to make them more what we call physically accurate. And then looking at kind of the physical render settings. And yeah, so we're going to be, if Simon can flip over to my screen quickly, I can show you quickly what that kind of like photorealistic render will look like. And then I'll ping it over to Matt, who can then get started with some of the integration. Let me just, what I'll do, I'll turn my camera off now as well, so you don't have to see me. So can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Cool, so this is the kind of look later on that we're going to be looking at, and we're going to break down this scene that I've got here. Look at, it's the same scene that we were actually using kind of previously, but instead we're changing some of the lights, we're changing the material setup, and then we're going to look at the physical renderer as opposed to the standard renderer. So hopefully this will give you guys some knowledge to take forwards to create some more photorealistic looks, because that was kind of another thing that was reoccurring that you guys have been asking for. So Matt, if you're ready, I'll throw this over. And as always, everyone, please ask us questions. We love the interaction. We love being able to help you guys with the questions that you have. And I'm sure Matt won't mind me interrupting him every so often.
No, go for it.
Cool, let me fire that over to you.
Right.
We live to interrupt you, Matt. You know that.
That's it, that's fine. It's been one of those days today, I know the feeling. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. You can see After Effects, which I don't need right now. So we're going to start in Cinema. There are a few ways of getting your Cinema 4D files into After Effects. Actually, I do need After Effects, really, don't I? One of them is, of course, that you can. Oh, hello. My After Effects is signed out, so that's fantastic. One of them is that you can render out your animation and export it as lots of file sequences. Oh, this is not what I need right now.
Don't worry, this never happens to anyone else.
It wouldn't be a live webinar if something technical hasn't happened.
No, this is very true. Here's hoping that you can't see my password. This is
No, you're good.
Free Adobe for everybody, but there's only one license spread between however many
We'll
hundred.
put it in the notes, don't worry.
Oh, for heaven's sake, I don't know my own password. I don't know my own password. Well, this is going to go well, isn't it? I know my password. Fantastic. Apologies. So one of the things you can do, you can export the PNG sequence and you can just bring it in as a file. That's fine. That's no different to any other editor, to be perfectly honest. So what we wanted to do is show you the fact that After Effects and Cinema 4D have a special relationship where we have very good access to integration that allows us to put files in Cinema 4D. So if you see, I've got my little ray gun movie down here in the bottom right hand corner, and I can just actually drag and drop my Cinema 4D file directly into my project, which is going to moan that I haven't got an installation because for some reason my After Effects is not being very happy at the moment. So if anybody has that, you need to drag and drop your file to the 3D down to the window, and it will bring up the Cineware options at the top, which clearly is lying because if it wasn't working, I wouldn't see it. If you ever need to, you can click on the options up here, and then you can choose which applications you are going to use. So you've got applications for Cineware, and then you've got applications for Edit Original, which means I can bounce back between Cinema 4D and After Effects at any one time. And all you need to do is just browse, find your particular version, and then you can go straight ahead and do it. I'm just going to see if I can copy and paste that in and then browse. No, okay, fine. There we go. Now I have an Edit Original if I really need to, which wants me to restart. I'm going to be okay because, to be honest, I have the original, so I can load this. But if you have Lite only, then in theory that should be configured already. However, getting back to the actual needed thing, we have our Cinema 4D file in After Effects. It's not a layered image as such, it is actually my Cinema 4D file. So I can scrub this, and if it had animation or if I'd changed something, then anything that relates to that file will be updated. On the left hand side, you've got viewports, you've got viewport settings for renderers, you've got current shading, you've got wireframe, which can make it faster. Not that you see an awful lot after doing that, but you can switch between all of these. The joy of this is it's live with the Cinema 4D file. It actually references it. So if in this Cinema 4D file I was to change something, and let's move that out, and let's move this. This is the unanimated one for anybody that is wondering. And then I save it, and then I go back to After Effects. My changes have been automatically done. I can't do any 3D in this viewport. I'm viewing the 3D of my file, and let's just turn on the display to ground shading with outlines and save again. Let's go back to After Effects, and you can see that even that updates. So I've got really good control over seeing this. I can do all sorts of things. So I can take my background and delete it. Let's save again. And then if I look underneath and go back, you can see I now have an empty background, which means I could create a solid layer. So let's do a solid. Let's make it mauve. Click OK, put it underneath, and now I'm layering up. So it's a really nice, quick integration. Now, one of the things that's really good about our link with After Effects is that they actually have our renderer in After Effects. So if you were worried that you're not going to be able to get the ambient occlusion and global illumination that you could get through Cinema 4D, you will, because it is our renderer. So if I did current or viewport or camera, you could even change the camera that you want to look through. Then you can update your rendering and shading, constant shading, and moving on and things like that. And you'll be able to actually get a really good update of this in no time. Although it appears that the geometry's gone a little bit doolally there. Not quite sure why. You still hear me okay? Just want to check.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Good. Sorry, there was a comment that someone said, why is the audio deactivated?
I'm checking on it. I'm check. For what it's worth, Walter, your settings here seem fine.
Okay, cool. So good, as long as it wasn't me and I'm not just sitting here rambling to myself.
No, thanks to all the other people saying they can hear it too. Thanks.
Good, thank you. Cheers for that. So that is one of the quick ways. It's good, it's useful, you can layer things up. The only downside is that you are then having to render the 3D through After Effects using Cinema. So it may be a smidge slow than if you'd have just rendered in rendered in Cinema and then put it straight into After Effects. But at least this way you get live updates, you get live experimentation, and you can quickly switch between the two. So that's one of the ways. Are there any quick questions on that before I show one of the new ways?
Oh, let's have a quick look. Someone's asked about the Lite version, the biggest pros and cons between both.
Well, the pro is it's free if you have After Effects. The cons are it's not as good as the full version because you haven't purely got the amount of tools that you could create stuff in 3D.
Yeah, and someone's also said, what if you're using Octane as the render engine? What would the workflow be like for that?
Honestly, I can't answer that. Having zero experience with Octane whatsoever, at the moment, I honestly don't know. Simon, do you know what that's like if you were to use a third-party render engine, or can we not do that currently?
The quick answer is no, but I know somebody who can, because next week we are having some compositing sessions, webinars with Lionel Vici-Domini, who is a wonderful 3D artist, and he's based in Paris. And we'll be sending this information out later on this week. And it was spoiler alert, I was going to say this at the end of the webinar, but since it's come up now, and he's going to be delving into things like linear color and 32-bit processing, and he has used all sorts of renderers. So that'll be a question for him next week, and I'll save it up. So this is another non-answer.
Excellent. Okay.
Got another one. Another one from William. So if you add a camera in AE, can you work in 3D space?
Yes, you can. Yes, you can work in 3D space, but it won't change this file because this file is referencing the Cinema 4D file. So I think you are looking through everything that you would see in Cinema. If you want to work around a model, this is the bit that we're going to get to in a second. Best resolution for this transfer that I can see Greg has asked, there is no resolution officially in this one because I'm simply referencing the Cinema 4D file. It just needs to be the same resolution as the comp that you have in After Effects. If you wanted to add Trapcode particular to something in an animation, would you use Motion Tracker to track it, or would you need a comp tag or something? No, we can get to that in a second, actually, if we have time, with particular.
You could also use for particular, you could add a light tie a light to something and then use that light as an emitter.
Yep. Someone has the Pro version. If you have a Pro generated file and the Lite version, would you still be able to import the file? Only if there is something used in the Lite version that isn't used in the Pro. So for example, if you've used some particular MoGraph effector in the Pro version, Lite simply won't be able to load it up. But if you've got the Pro version, you don't need to be worrying about Lite unless you're sending it to somebody else.
Got a couple more questions. Antonio said, what would be the advantage of bringing the C4D file into After Effects?
It allows you to composite it over things. That's pretty much it. That's what it's for. It's for compositing and adding effects. It's a post-production side.
Yeah, and Jay's asked, can you switch to the Lite version once my 6 months is up via Cineware?
Yes, you could do. However, if you've got a student version, your license may only be 6 months, but you can always renew it as long as you're a student. And then in the Lite version, how can I bake a model in After Effects as a single model? That's a good question. What I'm actually about to show you, I don't think is in the Lite version. So the baking side, which is going to use Red Giant stuff, will require the full version.
Also the student version, it will do it in.
Yeah, the student version, it will do it in, because the student's the full one, just with a limited license.
I just wasn't sure if we're saying full and people might think that their student version isn't the full version. It definitely is.
Yep. Okay. Is there a video and tech info for beginners? For what specifically, Rob? Can you animate the Cinema 4D model in After Effects? Not at this point, no. You would need to go back to the Cinema 4D file, do any animating that you want, and then switch back. I should be in school to have the student version. Yes, you need to be either in school or full-time education with like universities, colleges, but full-time education in general. Yes, Robert, for Cinema 4D, there's a lot of beginners courses and stuff out there. And I think we can send you to a link to Cineware if either Ellie or Simon would be Cineversity, sorry, if you guys would be able to do that. So
just did that.
Sure.
Marvelous, thank you very much. You beat me to it. Huzzah! Right, okay, I'm going to crash on now with the next part.
Keep asking the questions though as well, and we can always get back to them at the end.
Yep. One of the things that I'm about to do, I'm just going to undo my changes to this because I want it all in one and I don't want a background anymore, is I am going to export this as a model that we can use all in one go and put into After Effects using Trapcode, using one of the Red Giant products, using Mia, and then be able to look around your model and add post effects to it. Now, this requires a little bit of jiggery pokery in the file to start with. So the first thing I'm going to do is delete all of the things that I don't need. So I don't want a background, I don't want lights. What I am going to need to do, I am going to need to make some of these objects editable, or if they have a deformer on, I'm going to do what they call current state to object and make a copy of this that's in the correct shape. Because as you can see, I can still turn the tapers on and off, or turn off all sorts of things. And I'm going to need to basically finalize this model. So to start with, I'm going to take my zap and I'm going to press the C button, which makes it editable. It's made a null and a normal object. I'm going to take the normal object out and delete the null. I no longer need it. The ray gun, I'm going to right click and I'm going to do current state to object. The reason why that one as opposed to the other is because this is a deformer. So this finalizes the deformation. And now if I delete that one, you can see I have a thin file that's been tapered, but I now no longer have a deformer underneath. The sidebar, which I do only have one. I'm only going to stick to one on this one. I'm going to be lazy. I'm just going to press C to make editable. And once again, take out the null, delete the null. The fin at the back, same thing. Press C because it's a generator, make it editable. Take that out, delete that. Open up the ray gun emitter. Oh, I've got a host of things here. So I'm going to press C for the ray gun emitter wire and take that out. Delete that. All of these are just primitives. So I can press C on all of them in one go and take them out of the ray gun emitter, which I can now get rid of. The ray gun trigger is a deformer. So once again, right click, current state to object, drag and drop, delete the original. This is all sorts of things. So I'm going to, can I just right click current state to object on that? Yes, I can. So with the top one, I now have all of that with the deformation and the handle, the things and the grip, and then the lathe is already one already. So there we go. I have one long now mess of all sorts of things. So what I want to do, I want to bake this down. Now, baking is a very odd term to be using in 3D, but what it actually means, it will sort of finalize, solidify, and output a final file. To do this, I'm going to select all of my objects, and I want this to be one final object as well before I bake it. And so I'm going to right click, connect objects, and delete. You can do connect objects, which will do a connect object and place it at the bottom, and then I'll have two copies. In order to make my file tidier for this particular object, connect objects and delete, which means I get one final file. It's got all of its materials, all of the tags necessary for it to work, and it's just one piece of geometry. Now, to bake this out, object, bake object. Okay, it's relatively obvious for that one. The fun part is this, which is, what on earth do all of these mean and what do I need to press? For this particular part, I'm going to ignore ambient occlusion, I'm going to ignore normals, and I'm going to definitely ignore keep UVs. This means that it will rewrite the UVs using Cinema 4D's new automatic unwrapper in S22, that is, it's only in S22. It will still do that in previous ones, it's just not quite as pleasant. Illuminate, I will ignore, single texture I want, and replace objects. That means it will replace this object, which has multiple textures and multiple files, with a single object with one texture with all of the colors in the right place. That's very important for this one. The next thing that is important, for me, not so much in this file, but for you guys, is this bit. This is the height, width, and height, sorry, this is the pixel height and width in pixel size that you want your final texture to be. If you have a lot of interesting high definition detail in your object, like scratches or bump maps or panels, or if this was made up of all sorts of lines and crevices and all sorts of things, then 512 by 512 pixels for something this big would be awful. Your image would be pixelated and you wouldn't be able to see the final detail. So if you make your size bigger, 1024 by 1024, it will help. You can go 8 times larger than that, I think, for games engines at the moment. I'm not sure anything else registers it, but various other places will. So I'm going to stick to 1024 and 1024 because, to be honest, all I've got is block color. Color depth, not a problem. Then you need to say, where do you want to save it? And this is, where does my image file need to go? So let's go to desktop, and I'm just going to click open, and I'm going to be very naughty and save it directly to my desktop. As for file format, that entirely depends on what you're working with. TIFF for this example is absolutely fine. And then click bake, boom. And there I have my single baked object with my single baked texture and my file. And now if I look at my desktop.
Matt, I have a quick question, if you don't mind.
Yes.
So Patrick has asked, does the combining to one object delete any vertices on the inside that are unnecessary or that are overlapping?
No, it does not. So if all of that geometry is still there. There is nothing, what's the word? It's not been made efficient. If I was to look actually inside, I've still got exactly what I've got. It's just that the polygon objects are all part of one single object, but I can still move them as separate ones. So it's done no housekeeping, as it were.
Thanks.
That's right. So I now have one single object and one single texture with the lovely red and yellow bits. I'm going to delete the 3 textures or 4 textures that I don't want, which actually there's a quick thing you can do. If you go to edit and delete unused materials, it will tidy up your material manager for you. Now, this is the next bit, and this is the important part. I'm going to do File, Save Project for Cineware. It must be this bit in order for the next bit to work. If it doesn't, or if you don't, it won't work. It's quite simple. So Save Project for Cineware, and I'm going to call it Raygun, just so I know which one it is, Cineware. Let's try not to save it in my training one, and click Save. Okay, I now have a Cinewared file. Cineware is Cinema 4D's sort of interchangeable file format in which it's written certain information that other programs can use. Certain information like After Effects and Mia. So let's delete everything that I have in my composition at this point. And then I need to go to Layer, New, and Solid. And that solid I'm going to create is there. Ignore the fact that it's purple. We won't be using that for very long. And then in our lovely Trapcode suite, I'm going to go to Effect, Trapcode Mia. And this will bring up Mia, and it tells me I'm not licensed. Marvelous. We can ignore the red cross for the moment. Hold on.
Now Matt will show you what happens if you need to sign in and refresh your license.
Which is probably going to moan that I'm signed in on my other account. Oh, but please.
Just put the same password in that we learned earlier.
Huzzah. Am I licensed? I should be. I don't know. Anyway, we'll come back to that one. Apologies. It's because I switched between profiles. I'm licensed on my other profile, but not this one. Anyway, on the left-hand side, go to Geometry. And where it says Plane, this time we're going to choose a model. And the model, you can choose all sorts of preset ones that exist inside Mia, and they're all lovely and wonderful, but not my ray gun. So I'm going to click Add New Model, and then I'm going to find my Raygun Cineware file and click Open. It will appear down the bottom. Yes. And then I click OK. And now it will appear here. As you can see, it doesn't have any of my texture on it yet. This is because we need to add the texture as a layer in our After Effects file. So if I go to my Finder, drag and drop my TIFF file directly into my project timeline down the bottom, just drag it to the bottom out of the way and hide it. I don't want to be able to see it. I don't need it to be seen, but I do need it to be there. Because what we do when you go and select your medium solid again, because this is a layer affected, an effect added to a layer, we can then go to texture, and then where it says layer texture, you can choose the zap texture surface color, and boom, there I have my texture on it. Now, in order to be able to look around it, as someone asked earlier, I can right click, I can do a new camera, just click OK to that. That one was done. New cameras can be done either through layer, new, or right click in the timeline, and then press C to bring up your camera movement tools. And now I can look at my model and I can zoom around it and I have my model with my texture on it. I'm going to press C again to pan around it. Another C will bring me closer to it, and then C will go back to the normal camera tool, and I can look around with a really big red X in the way.
Matt, I got a scene set up that doesn't have a red X on it that I can show a quick little tip whilst you're doing that. Can we just segue for 2 seconds and I could show that?
That sounds like a good idea. So I will send that directly to you. You don't appear on my list. Why don't you appear on my list?
Is it Maxon presenter?
I can make myself a presenter. I have the power.
There you go. You've been segued. Thank you for that.
No problem. 2 quick things. One is, hang on, what did Matt just say over the last 10 minutes? How am I supposed to remember that? Just in case you were thinking that. Not only can you watch the recording of this webinar, but also on the redgiant.com/tutorials page, there is a rather useful CD file import tutorial. And I won't play the whole thing, but I just wanted to play just a few seconds at the beginning because Harry Frank goes into the process of using something from the content library. In this case, it's a mobile phone. And then he shows exactly what Matt was talking about taking all the different objects and bringing them down into one, and then also baking that into one texture, and goes through the idea about what you need to do in order to get it into After Effects. So in about 3 or 4 minutes. So it's just like a memory jogger for that sort of thing. And if I jump over to After Effects now, here we go. And just show you this thing. This is exactly what Matt was just showing, and it's just a slightly different scene. So I have an instance of Mia, and under the geometry, we are pointing that at a 3D model. And eagle-eyed people will notice that on a previous version of Mia, it was said OBJ file, but now we can have not only OBJs, but actually Cineware files. So that includes the animation, which is inbuilt into the Cineware file. And under the 3D model settings, it's pointing, as Matt mentioned, to that layer. And if we just go down here under the texture, this is the texture layer for this drone. If we turn it off, then it doesn't have its texture anymore. And to turn and point it back to the drone, this is great. And here's the little trick I wanted to show you. In the background, I've got a really boring picture. In fact, I stole this whole project from our head of Trapcode products, Christine. She's the group product manager. So if you ever see this, Christine, yes, I'm stealing your project. But in this case, I've got a background which has an instance of Lux and Universe Blur on it. So it's just really a easy bit of stock footage. But what I wanted to do is to somehow show that this robot was in the scene. And so here's a little trick that you can do inside Mia. If we go into the Mia layer, in the material section, not only can you change the amount of shininess and the specularity and the reflectivity of all sorts of elements, you can point the reflections or the reflections map at the background layer. Usually you do this with an HDRI image or a spherical image, but there's just a nice little cheat. So if I don't do this, if I point the environment map at none, then you can see the color slightly changing on that. But then if I point it at that background and making sure that in After Effects I get that blur and the Magic Bullet Looks instance, then we see this before and after. Here it is with none, and we're taking on some of the color values from the background. So there's an interesting question that often happens now. It's like, well, why don't you just do the whole thing inside Cinema? And the answer is, it depends, because you can do loads of different things in After Effects and composite stuff really at the last minute. And that's a whole other topic that we'll be discussing next week, as we mentioned on Lionel's webinars, for about post-production routines. But I just wanted to show you something without a red X, essentially, on the screen, but also just to show that little trick. And last little bit, was to say that if you did happen across the series of tutorials, these 20-second tutorials that we've got available on my YouTube channel, then guess what? We got exactly this tip for 20 seconds. Let's just turn off the audio. Just as a reminder, this is where you can find that texture layer, and also this is where you can find that little tip right at the end of going into material and just pointing the environment map at something inside your image. Great.
Okay. We've had a couple of questions from Arnold. So is there a way in After Effects how you can now send one of these projects to someone else who has neither Cinema or Red Giant? And the short answer is no, not really. The receiving party needs to have the plugins in order to be able to work. Cinema 4D Lite is already in After Effects anyway, so anybody with After Effects will already have the Lite version. However, of course, the Red Giant things need to be purchased in order for people to be able to use those plugins. Okay, you can ping it back to me now if you like. The red X has magically disappeared.
Isn't that funny? We're having an opportunity to quickly fix it. There you go. So I'll make you presenter.
Yeah, thank you. It is, as we always do, turn it off and back on again.
Yeah.
Matt, we have had one other question as well from William.
Yeah.
He's saying, is it quicker to animate and render in C4D or in After Effects and Mia?
It depends what you're trying to do. Cinema 4D means that it's native, so it's doing its own thing. At this point, actually, there is no Cinema 4D in this scene. Mia is doing the 3D entirely by itself. It's okay, it's good at what it does, but you're always going to get more options for rendering in Cinema 4D natively. However, one of the joys of this particular part is what we're about to show you, which is that because it's now a layer in Cinema, in After Effects, I can do all sorts of really weird and wonderful things, like go to Universe, go to Hollow Matrix 2, which is an effect, and then I can open my dashboard and I'm going to choose not one of those, stylize, where is it, Hollow Matrix. There are some really lovely color ones. Why is it not letting me configure it? Choose a preset, that's why I pressed the wrong button. You can see I'm still new to this Red Giant side of it, so I apologize. And it's not brought me anything in. Marvelous. Oh, it's because, why have I got two hollow matrices?
You've got a whole bunch of them on that one.
I've got, yeah, let's have
Just
all
keep
of
clicking.
them.
That's the trick.
It's
By
the way
the way,
you do everything, isn't it? You just press everything and hope.
Quickly, then click it quickly, absolutely. On that instance of Hollow Matrix, by the way, if you click Disable Time Effects, then it will allow it to view what you did in Mia and the previous effect in the stack.
Yeah, okay. I was heading to that, I think. So
Sorry.
Yeah, on the left-hand side, you need to turn off an option in order to do it, because at the moment, as I say, it's completely video affected and hollow matrices my entire screen, and I was going to choose a preset like bad color, which is an odd thing to want to apply, but it does work. And then, as Simon said, you must turn on disable time effects, because what it does is it then applies like a hollow matrix effect to your object. But the reason why this is much easier to deal with is that if you kind of go, because let's face it, we have clients who go, that's really great, I like it, can we move the ray gun around to the left a bit? And then of course you have to re-render your entire file. However, with this particular part, I can just go to my camera, choose my move around, and then go, what, you mean like that? And now we can choose it, and now we can have it moved around and do all sorts of things. It means that you're not limited by the camera angle that we had in Cinema 4D to start with, and it's still all updatable whilst applying different effects. Once again, it's ignoring the background, so if I want, I can do a, what can I do? Is it a shape solid layer? And then I can put that underneath again. And now I've got a background, and you could add all sorts of interesting things to that layer. What did I do before? Generator fractal background. And there you go, you can make it spacey. There's my technical language there for that. So there we go. It's a nice little tip. You can move around, you can stylize your object, you can choose the colors, you can choose the gradients. There are obviously a lot of things that you can do in the Red Giant applications. You know, you could spend years going through all of them in a webinar type fashion. So there's lots of things that you can just play with. But one of the great things is, of course, you can click open up the dashboard and you get some form of idea of what it is you are about to apply. And then you can have a look underneath. You can click on one of them and it will bring up presets that allows you to switch between them. So I could make it more ghostly. I could make it a little bit more unstable, glitchy if I wanted, and you can apply and you can have a look. Oh no, I've applied it to the wrong thing. That's why. I've applied it to a background, which actually doesn't look too bad. Happy accident there. And
Designed.
then you can design, that was it. So you can have this sort of lovely holographic look for our super sci-fi retro gun. Okay.
I think you're right, Matt. That the comment about why you would work in one particular circumstance is absolutely about speed. And absolutely about the number of iterations you can go in, especially if you're sitting brainstorming with a producer, or you have to come up with a number of ideas about what actually works. So I've seen people use this as a previs mechanism, and I've seen people use it as the final render delivery. It really does depend on when you have your project taken away from you.
Yeah. Okay, so there we go. Thank you very much for bearing with me through numerous logging in issues. I'm going to throw this back at Elly now.
Yeah.
I'm going to show you some interesting render techniques.
Also, Matt, one other question, I'll take that,
Yeah.
from Arnold. He said, is there a way to share the objects of other team members? And I think he meant with, let's say someone doesn't have Red Giant and Cinema 4D, and they wanted to kind of share the model between people who do have or don't have the same kind of plugins. Would it be a case of exporting in a certain way?
If you haven't got Red Giant, you won't be able to share this file. If you'd saved out this After Effects file, you wouldn't be able to do it. If you were just saving out as Cinema, then as long as you've got Lite, you will be able to open the Cinema 4D file.
There's a halfway house as well. You're absolutely right, Matt. But what I've seen some production studios do is to add additional renders onto stacks inside a comp as final render files, then switch off the effect so that if they can still provide layered files, if you want to composite something, you wouldn't be able to change the effect, but you can change the hierarchy or change the blend modes to some extent.
Okay. Yeah. That's cool.
Okay, so shall I take over?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna kind of break down this scene that I've created, and what we're going to look at is creating a slightly more photorealistic look from the one that we'd made previously. And it's kind of like a three-step process that I've gone through. I've changed my light setup. I'm still using the 3-point lighting setup itself, but I'm using more like physically accurate lights. I'm then going to change some of the materials and how they're set up, and then finally look at like physical render settings. So if I take a look at my scene lights, and I'll go to my 4 views. So I've got, where's my thing? So I've still got my fill light, my key light, and my rim light, which is what we had in our kind of previous scene for a ray gun. But instead of using the standard material, the standard lights, sorry, I'm using what's called Pbr lights, and these are sort of preset to be the most physically accurate. And so these settings for these lights are already pre-made. You can change them, but what it's done is it's made them so as realistic as possible. So the type and the shadow are both set to area. And then in details, we've got our fall off, which is inverse square, physically accurate. And to show that quickly, if I grab a normal light, set my fall off, you'll see it creates a spherical fall off. And that's sort of what it's done for these Pbr lights. And then I added a top light as well, just to kind of create some more light on top. And then you'll also see I've created a sky object. And on my sky object, I've got a material and I've got a HDRI image, which is actually found in the content browser. And I've added that. So if I open up my material, I've added that in the luminance. So I have no other channels selected because I just want the light from the HDRI to kind of light my image. And you'll also see I've got a compositing tag. And that is because normally when you first set this up, it will look like this. And so you'll be able to see it in the camera, but you can actually just right click, add a compositing tag, and then turn that off. And then there's loads of different settings in here, like transparency, reflection. If you want that HDRI image to not be seen, you can switch those off, but I've got that to show. And so that's kind of like step one. I've changed those lights, and that alone would make quite a nice difference to the scene. But you can then add new things like a material setup. So if I open up my red metal, I opted for metal materials instead of plastic like before. And what you'll see here is I'm only using the reflectance channel, don't use the color channel. And in here, I've set a GGX. So I've just added a GGX here. And I've changed some of these settings and I've set the layer color to red, and then just like a layer Fresnel, which is where we can choose dielectric or conductor, and then you can select like a preset. And then my second material is a gold material, and this was also from the content browser. I would recommend having a look through some of the preset materials in there, and then just see how they've been created. Because once you get an understanding of that, you can then create your materials this way, and this is a more what we would call physically accurate way, and that, along with the lighting, along with the render settings, is how you get like a photorealistic look. So this is the same. This has got a GGX layer, and in the layer color, so the Fresnel is the same as well, and in the layer color you can set a layer. And if I select that, you can see this is built up with multiple different shaders and the blending mode set to multiply, similar to like in Photoshop, how you would layer things up. And so if I switch those off, I don't know if you can see this square here. As I switch them on, you can see how that builds up to create our overall color, effectively, the look of it. And then we've also got a bump map, and it's just a noise layer on there. And that, let me come out of here, if I get close up to here, the bump creates this roughness, but it fakes it. So it's not like a displacement map. If it was a displacement map, it would be like actually creating the roughness and displacing the polygons, whereas this fakes it, but it creates a really nice look still. And so that was all I really did for my materials. I changed them that way and then took some out of the content browser. And then the final step really is to kind of just look at our render settings. So if I take these up, so I've selected my physical renderer. I've got my ambient occlusion and my global illumination on still from the previous scene. And if we go into physical, I'm not going to go into depth of field and motion blur, but if you do want to add those to your scene, this is where you can control that. That being said, things like depth of field does require some other changes. For example, in the camera, you need to make sure you have your focus distance set and your f-stop set to match the depth of field as well. It wouldn't just be a case of switching that on. So when we come down, we have three different samplers, fixed, adaptive, and progressive. We take a quick look at fixed. This is like a fixed quality, therefore a fixed number of samples are going to be calculated for each pixel in the scene. So it will render the whole image at a certain level determined by the sampling quality, which is this next option. And you can see here you've got low, medium, high, and then custom. The second sampler is adaptive. This will give you an option to set a quality range for the scene, and the render engine will decide where it will use more and less samples to achieve kind of the best results. And this is kind of most suitable for optimized rendering, since you can set like the minimum maximum quality, and then the shading error threshold, you can set the min max quality based on a percentage. The rule is lower percentages is better quality, but then longer render times. And then finally, these 4 options down here is to set the samples and quality for the blurriness inside the materials and the shadows. So by default, these are set to 2, which is often okay for a lot of work. But for more kind of precise shadows and blurring, these can be actually set to 4. And these are actually the settings that I went for. And let me get and that was kind of the outcome. And for me on my machine, which is sort of like an i7 iMac, the render time was about 30 minutes. And I think it's quite a nice result, considering we're only using the physical renderer within Cinema 4D. We've not used kind of a third-party renderer, and all we've really done with our same scene that we've been creating over these kind of like 4 or 5 weeks is change the lights to Pbr lights, and adding a sky with a HDRI. And then we sort of just changed our materials and how they were set up, and then just changed a couple of settings in the physical renderer, and you're able to then create what I think looks like quite a nice result relatively easily. So that was quite a speed way through it because I was conscious of the time. But I guess, do we have any questions on anything?
It's a really nice render. It's a really nice result.
No, I think, yeah, we just got to see if there are any questions. It's gone very quiet. Is everyone still there?
I was going to look at going into the pro render settings, but I thought I would avoid that and stick to just the physical renderer. And some people did ask about, there's a few questions about Redshift kind of in the previous feedback, and we can link to Darren's Redshift webinars if people kind of have access to that and would like to know how to learn more about rendering in a third-party renderer as opposed to kind of in C4D.
Yeah, we can absolutely put those links inside the follow-up email. Plus, Lionel's going to be covering Redshift next week too.
Oh, great. Good timing then.
It's always good timing for Redshift, yes.
Some questions coming in. Patrick asked where subsurface scattering was. Are you able to just quickly show, if you create a new material and load it up, go to the luminance channel, because you'd normally do subsurface under a luminance. On the texture drop down, go to effects, and there is subsurface scattering. For people who don't know what subsurface scattering is, it is how light disperses through semi-translucent materials such as skin, milk, candle wax, that sort of thing. It allows to get proper light dispersion through things. It's a little bit of a faff to set up in a scene very quickly. You have to have some playing with it, but he just wanted to know where it was. What is the best third-party renderer that you can recommend for Mac?
For Mac?
It's going to be one of those wonderful non-answers, Greg, because we can't recommend anybody else.
Our head of marketing, Paul Babb, did say a couple of weeks ago that Redshift will be available this year. We've upgraded it from soon to this year. And so I mean, it's the same answer you probably heard us say a few times over the last few months. But we are continuing to work on it as a company. And so thank you for your patience again. And officially, I'd say the best third-party renderer I would ever use, what would that be, Matt? Would that be Redshift?
Yeah, of course we're going to say Redshift. We're not allowed to say anything else. I mean, yes, it would be Redshift. It is good, but obviously we can't go around recommending products that aren't ours. Is there
You
a
can always
benefit
have a
in
quick Google and see the renderers that are available on that. There are lots of people who do kind of like what we'd class as quote render wars end quote, and they kind of look at the differences between the renderers. So where we can't obviously recommend, there is a lot of information out there if you're a Mac user.
Yeah. One of the questions coming: is there a benefit in realism to using ProRender? ProRender is Cinema 4D's GPU renderer for people that don't know. It's very quick, it's quite stable, and there is very little configuring options, which actually means you don't have to worry about playing with a lot of settings trying to figure out what's what. You can just turn it on basically, and it will work. It's using the GPU as opposed to the CPU, so obviously you've got some, you know, depending on if you've got a better graphics card in your machine, then it will be faster. GPU renderers are in general faster than CPU renderers across the board, so that's just one of the things that you've got to be aware of. Any other questions? Next week is Magic Bullet webinar. Yes. Would you get the same render quality and speed when you go to After Effects? No. Quality, yes, you can get the same quality. Speed, not necessarily, because you're then asking After Effects to render something using Cinema through After Effects. It can be a bit slower, but the advantage is, of course, again, you don't have to re-render in the entire thing out of Cinema to do some editing. Can you bake things like reflectance so you can bring into After Effects? Yes, you can, using the bake texture tag rather than the bake object one where I did it earlier. You can actually choose textures. So you can get Cinema 4D to calculate what it can see if it had an environment, and then you could use that as a texture to fake reflections in After Effects. One from Winifred: I've been avoiding upgrading my Mac since they stopped working in NVIDIA. I am, however, reluctant to switch to Windows. From your experience with newer computers and laptops, has it changed much, especially from rendering? I'm not quite sure I understand the question. I mean, I suppose in terms of rendering, nothing is particularly different in using the later OSs. Cinema 4D, however, something like S22 relies very heavily on metal, and Cinema 4D now more than ever requires updated graphics cards. If you're an updated graphics card drivers, updated graphics card drivers. If you're using a piece of software and it's using outdated drivers because your OS is 3 years old, it will never be as stable as using the most up-to-date drivers that the current version of Cinema was built for. As for using Windows, I use Windows all the time. Not a lot's really changed in the speed of rendering or anything like that, but not that I can think of. We got any more questions coming in before we look? We're 1 minute too. We can wrap up.
I think that's the majority of them from what I can see. Here we go. Have you seen a difference in performance when using the NVIDIA Studio driver in comparison with the normal one?
As far as I'm aware, I'm not sure about performance. However, stability for what it is using, we do recommend the Studio driver. There's a tech support one for you as well. That's what we're getting all the time. So,
yeah, I think that's all the questions we've got at the moment.
Yeah, that's it.
Do you mean we're about to wrap up on time for once?
We are our final webinar, and we sign off on time.
Oh yeah.
Well, the final one in June, put it that way.
There aren't any more in June. Well, there aren't any more from us in June.
Yes, that's the joke. But yes, thank you everyone for joining us for the last few weeks. We're definitely going to be doing more of these. So we're just bouncing around and scheduling different topics and so on. But it's been wonderful having both of you, Matt and Elly, to kind of talk through these things with us. And also, it's been wonderful to have you all joining us, and we really appreciate all the interaction and all the questions. It's really makes these things, I think.
Definitely.
It's really good to sort of like be able to answer specific questions or bounce ideas off other people. Otherwise, I think as Jonas said last week, you may as well have just had a tutorial and a video. So this is kind of the fun part of it, really.
Absolutely. And also, if you've got follow-up questions and suggestions for other sessions, please get in contact, training@maxon.net. And also keep an eye out for those emails from us about future sessions, and also on the Maxon and the Red Giant Twitter handles. That's where we typically share more information about what's happening. Fantastic.
So is that? Have we got anything else to say? We've just got next week's webinar is the Magic Bullet one. Everything that can be found on our Red Giant blog page.
Shall I quickly just sum up? We will be back. So let me just grab the screen. I just wanted to show you where that was, because we have the capability of, here we go. Oh, two other questions that came up several times. One was, hey, where can I go for more training things? And I know we mentioned it, but Cineversity.com has a whole plethora, a cornucopia of titles. A great one, yes, a great one is the Cinema 4D Quick Tips. And that distills lots of concepts down into a few minutes. But also, if you wanted to watch any of the previous sessions that we've run in this series, just go to the blog page at Red Giant, so redgiant.com, and the blog here, and it's under the Demystifying title, if you like, the series. And it lists all the ones we did in May, and all the ones we did in June, and all the ones we're going to be doing in July. And the links themselves, these are for registering if you haven't actually signed up yet, but also once it's happened, they are the links through to the recording. So this is where you'll instantly be able to watch any of the previous recordings we've done.
There's our UK YouTube channel as well, which is YouTube.com/C4D UK. So that's got a few tutorials from me and Elly on there as well. We've got our quick tips, which will be linked in the email that comes out, doesn't it, anyway, which is our very long quick tips link.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Oh, yes, as Kent points out, the 3D motion show, that might be good for us to mention. So we're doing a whole host of those in July to tie in with SIGGRAPH. So we're doing a number of days of all sorts of different artist-led. So we typically have fantastic artists who do those. So 3dmotionshow.com as well. Thank you everyone for keeping us honest. So we get what we're talking about.
You on, that's all.
Yes, exactly.
Make sure you're listening each week.
That's true. That is true. Is anyone there?
Can everyone see my screen?
Absolutely. Take a shot. Is this being recorded? Yes. Yes, it is. Cool. So thank you again, everyone. Really appreciate you spending this time with us, and we'll see you on the next one.
Take care, guys.
All right. Take it easy.
See you all soon.
All right. Cheers then. Bye.
Bye.